Somehow we have returned. Welcome to Cantina Conversations.
Yeah, but come on, touching his, like his belly, like, oh.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Cantina Conversations after many years. I am the number one Kylo Ren fanboy, Travis Snell, and I'm joined by...
Fulcrum, Taylor Field. I was not expecting you to drop that intro.
No, I said, because we have another intro to replace that one, but I'm always keeping that one because that's the good cheesy one. You got Diego in there. When I'm like, oh, Taylor, yeah, finally get rid of that one. I'm like, oh, no, it's same. Because if people don't know the history of the show, I don't even know how it started. I think it just started as far as back in the day, there'd be a Star Wars TV show, trailer, movie trailer, whatever it be, news. And this was probably I'd have to go back and find the first one, but this is probably year 2, year 3, probably Last Jedi around time. And because it's 2017, we started 2015. So we had this idea of there's so many times on the podcast it'd just be me and Taylor talking. It'd be good. Briggs was with us, Briggs is a big Star Wars fan. Kirkland was, but as Kirkland would admit, he's a bit more quieter back then. But there'd be many times where it would just be Dylan and Jessica, just especially if it's just a 4-person cast, just be listening to me and Taylor go on and on about Star Wars and Babylon. So that's where we're like, okay, let's create this own show, and that ran for a couple years. It just was a monthly special. And then we got very busy. But before we got very busy, we did go through every single episode of the Clone Wars retrospective in honor of the new season, which you can go back. You can find on YouTube the whole playlist of all the things we talked about in the past. You can find every Clone Wars retrospective. But people may be wondering, well, why? Why are you back? Well, that leads us to part 2. That does nothing for the audio listeners, but because
Well,
you've
it
clicked
might.
on the
It
topic. Oh, maybe, I guess. But yes, we have brought it back because Clone Wars, it was a combo. We got very busy, and Clone Wars, that was a lot of episodes, and it was the thing we didn't reduce amount of time, so we took a break because we did so much other stuff. Gauntlet popped off. We had multiple newscasts and After Nines and everything like that. And but that's what we're doing today. So for the next 4, I'd say 3.5 weeks, you will be getting 4 episodes at least of Cantina Conversation. I'm gonna say that's the run right now. It's scheduled to come back, and if you enjoy this, let us know, because this is a very old school show. Now, what people might be wondering too, because I know there's gonna be people like Kirk and they go, oh, hey, I don't have time to watch Rebels, or I have no interest in watching Rebels. Me and Taylor are gonna talk about the show, but I feel like we're also, if you guys know anything, even with Clone Wars, each episode, there's many people that weren't watching the show with us, but they tune in because each episode there's usually some debate or some conversation we had about some aspect of the Force or canon or lore, whatever it may be. And what we're gonna try our best to do is treat this. We will review the show, but I think we're going to talk a lot in broad strokes and a lot overall about the characters more so, because there's a bunch of characters in the show that are going to be in Ahsoka, and that's going to be the big question, right? Everyone has. It's like, is this going to be something that holds your hand? Is it going to jump right into and you feel lost? That we can't answer, but this can give you a nice little buffer with me and Taylor here. So if you end up liking this, we're reviewing, I guess, again, the format each season. We're not going to do each episode because it was a busy year, and we should have probably been on a bit sooner, but I was like, okay, well, we only got, maybe it'll be Ahsoka too, but now's the time to do a Rebels, because this is, there, who knows what's going to happen in the future. This is the time to lead up to it. So we'll be doing 4 episodes. Each season will be covered. There will be spoilers, so if you are someone that's planning to watch the show before, or in general you don't want to be spoiled anything, then yes, maybe come back another time. But if you don't care, if you just want a little brusher, and if you're watching Ahsoka without watching Rebels, that to me, you can just check out the show, because there's going to be spoilers in that show. So Taylor Field, I'm going to start with you on this return of Cantina Conversations. Like I said, everyone, if the old listeners, they'll know this. This was a show that people liked for our banter and stuff like that, and Clone Wars for my bad pronunciations, which I'm sure will happen again. So if you do enjoy this, let us know, and you never know what can happen. But Taylor Field, how do you, I guess we can kind of just go overall, but we're going to talk about specific season, but how do you feel about just Rebels overall?
This show, when it first came out, I did not have a heightened level of excitement for it. I remember when they announced it. I remember when Clone Wars It would have been when Disney bought Star Wars. They're like, yeah, we're canceling Clone Wars. And I was crushed because this is when they were pumping out season 6, but they call it the lost episodes or whatnot. And I was thinking, man, this is heartbreaking because we were getting the juicy stuff in the Clone Wars, and they canned it. My soul was crushed. And we were getting this show, and I did not have any excitement for this show, mostly because I was very, very upset due to Clone Wars being canceled. So this show comes out. I don't get on board right away. I don't dive into it. I'm busy rewatching Clone Wars, for like the 5th, 7th time because it's just perfection. And so finally I get around to Rebels when I start to notice them really tapping into the world. And I say that because Clone Wars was in this dire situation where is it canon? Is it not canon? Disney is basically retconning things. How does Clone Wars fit in? And Rebels comes into the picture, especially in season 2, where they start dropping certain things and bringing characters in. It's like, oh, then this means that everything that happened in Clone Wars is canon. And I thought that was fantastic. So Rebels was like a spiritual successor to that, and that's when I really started to appreciate it. And not because it was just Clone Wars 2.0, but it was creating its own unique self-sustaining identity. But it was pulling things that were very familiar from the Star Wars universe as a whole. That I loved. Getting into it and actually being attached to these characters was fantastic. And by the time we get to the season where Thrawn is introduced, I was over the moon. I remember being in Toronto Fan Expo and they were previewing the episodes early with Thrawn there. It was just such a great time, and I couldn't believe it. This was my first interpretation of this character outside of my mind, outside of the books on that I was reading. So this show has really excelled, and it has not held back at being dark at times too. I forgot how, especially in this first season, how dark certain things were that occurred. And of course it has that lighthearted kiddiness, but they definitely do not hold back at times. And I'm telling Madison as we're watching it, like, this is a kid's show. Look what they just did. Holy shit. Like, this is insane. I've gone through this season or this entire show probably twice total, not as much as Clone Wars. And I've watched select scenes over and over again because I just find some stuff in this series just hit home so hard. And yeah, so this will be my 3rd time going through it, and I'm happy to do it. It's been a few years, and it's funny because when Ahsoka was coming out, I told myself, oh, I don't need to rewatch Rebels. And then like yesterday, you're like, yo, you want to do a Rebels retro? Like, okay, let's do it. So I had to like buckle down and catch up on season 1.
And that's it. Okay.
That's it.
What end point? Yeah. So this will be my second rewatch. I'm somebody, and I don't care. I will hold to it. And maybe there's certain talking points, but I enjoy Rebels more than Clone Wars for a few reasons. Excuse me. I enjoy. Each season does have a few one-off episodes, right, where it's just the Rebels crew having a good time. Maybe not having a good time, right? They're in the Dark Ages and all this stuff, but for me, the Dark Ages was fine in this era because it was right when Star Wars was back with Disney. So that's why I was kind of fine with it back then. I still am. It's more so now when we get Dark Age stuff, I'm like, okay, we've been doing this for a while. But I didn't watch it in first run. I was going to wait because I didn't really love Clone Wars. You can go back and we reviewed every single episode. It definitely does get better later on, and I still don't think there's great seasons. I think there's great arcs, and there's still good episodes. I don't think it's a trash show. I think it's just always the most overrated of the Star Wars bunch. But what I always was annoyed by Clone Wars and what I liked with Rebels, it is a more, oh god, why am I forgetting the term? Because episodic is sometimes what Clone Wars is. I'm forgetting the good goddamn term for TV when it's just like it's a story back. It's not a procedural either, but either way, I like that. One, there's in a weird timeline where episodes would release. Oh, this episode happened, and then this actually episode happened. No, 2 months later, it's a weird timeline order, and I like just the story that it was a sync going from point A to point B. It was never, and I get with Clone Wars, they had lots of characters to do that, right, and manage, and so I just like that storytelling aspect better. I think one thing I will say, probably maybe when I rewatch it, I'll change my mind. I could say that I don't think Rebels ever reaches the heights that Clone Wars does. I think there are some great arcs, especially, that ending in season 7. I think the highest point of Clone Wars, Rebel can't get to, but overall, consistently, what would I rather watch is Rebels. I really like the Kanan and Ezra relationship as far as I've always talked about. I always want to see more of a Jedi and a Padawan, and people are going to go, oh, Obi-Wan and Anakin. that to me, we got so much in the movies, and in the Clone Wars, I feel like they give a little bit more. But even then, there's stuff with Anakin and Ahsoka, which you do have. But I guess for me, there's something that I love. And I've talked about this many times. I love the idea of seeing them the very first time with their Padawan, and that's what happens here. And we'll get more in that with that. So I think I just like that the early stages of a Padawan and a master getting to, or Jedi Knight, whatever, a teacher getting to know one another. So yeah, it works. I think this again. I do have issues. I'm gonna say this as the overall, and then I'm never really gonna talk about it again. Other than probably I'll throw a slide shade at the show sometimes here and there. But my thing is, as usual, in this era, I still don't like Kanan and Ezra being around as Jedi. I don't like Ahsoka being around, and I don't like the Inquisitors. You'll never not tell me that the Sith are the rule of two, and you have like 5 to 6 other Sith characters. I know they're not Siths, but they are Siths. They can say whatever they want, and Taya's gonna say something to this bad.
Well, I want to throw an idea, a concept your way, and you have. Again, Ezra is not a Jedi. He just knows the Force. But you have obviously children that are
training
born
to be a Jedi.
Yeah, you have people like Luke isn't the only one born in this time period who has the Force. Other kids are born at this time have the Force.
He was.
But they're Jedi is obviously that title, but there's tons of kids like Broom Boy. There's always these kids born. They got the
That's
Force.
the sequels.
That's
fine. I'm fine
They're
with
not
the
using
sequels.
it, right? Like
in the original trilogy, did anyone other than Luke and Leia have the Force?
oh, I'm sure there's a few. They just didn't make it.
No.
Skywalker story.
Did they show us or tell us any other children or people that had the Force other than Luke and Leia in the original trilogy? No, they did not. I'll answer for you. No, they did not. So that's where I like, because that's my Bible. I know people go, oh, it's a big galaxy. I don't care. I like Luke being a New Hope. I like him being the sole hero. And even Leia, I'm fine with that. Not because the blood, just like, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with Broom Kid because those are the sequels. I feel that Rebels definitely does start to pad and add some things. And these are things I dislike, but I'm saying them up front because those are things that I'll never like. And that's one thing that Clone Wars can do better, because even then, I still don't like, I like, what's her name? Ventress, but that to me is still bullshit. Like, they shouldn't have a bunch of mini Sith apprentices around. There's supposed to only be 2. So there's things I don't like, but that's where I'm getting them out of the way, where there's overall concepts that I don't just jive with, but I go, okay, eventually I look past it. I wish the show was maybe in a different era, but it does work. And I think, like Taylor says, it does incorporate some good Clone Wars things, especially as you go along. I think season 1, they do little points to it, but nothing massive. So yeah, I enjoy the show a lot. I think it definitely gets better as it goes along. I think in season 1, it's definitely, there is dark stuff, but it is definitely has a lot more of a kid vibe. But I feel like Clone Wars had that too. I feel like when you start early on, Clone Wars felt very more accessible, and then once the story, especially I'd say more 3 and 4, you get to those points where, okay, not that kids can't watch it, but it's a little more sophisticated and there is more darkness too, and you deal with the dark side. And yeah, so is there anything in particular you want to hit on overall before we get in here?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
So which I think this is the best way, because going up episode by episode might be tough. There's episodes that I think I'll shout out as my favorites. I'm sure you will too. I want to go with, what character do you want to talk about first? And that might be a good way to kind of travel through the season and hit on multiple arcs. And that's why I'm also picking characters, because that gives people an idea of, hey, I don't know anything about Satine. I don't know anything about Hera. Well, we're going to talk about them and give you the overall. So who would you like to start with?
You know what? Let's do Kanan, because there's
Okay,
a lot that
Kanan.
they've added to since Rebels with Kanan and development wise and stuff. So let's do him.
Well, the floor is yours. Try and keep it to season 1 and the outside stuff. Don't talk about the other seasons, but season 1, his journey here, obviously.
Yeah. So
Starts out with him and the crew.
we got to see Kanan expanded in Clone Wars season 7. We got to see him in the Bad Batch, and the Bad Batch is really like, after watching that Bad Batch premiere and then watching this scene. Or not this scene, but like a scene in I think it was the penultimate episode, or maybe it was the finale episode. I can't remember, but he's being held hostage, and just the intensity of the Grand Inquisitor like probing him, and just like, what was the last thing your master, Balaba, I think that was her name, Balaba. What did
Are you
she
talking
say?
about in this show he was getting probed? Or are you talking about, okay.
yeah.
I was like, he got probed again in Bad Batch. Wow, but okay.
He did. Well, yeah, the Grand Inquisitor was like talking to him, like, what, like antagonizing him, like, what is it your master said to you? And he's like, run. And then just getting flashbacks of when the clones just turned on his master, and she's like, run, Kanan, and she's getting that deathly scream to her. It's like, oh, this just is so heavy. And just the intensity of him just rising up from being like, we know he's a Jedi, but he keeps it so hidden, and now it's becoming more well known to the Empire and everything throughout the season, and just the fact that he was a Jedi Padawan. He had no further training, and now he's got his own Padawan. It's pretty crazy. Like the cap off of his experience only goes so far.
Yeah.
And I like that he knows how to, for the most part, control his emotions and control his anger. That's something that he would have been taught and had to deal with. But it shows the dynamic, because he was much younger too than Ezra is now. Ezra was much older than him now that Ezra is being taken in. But he's just such a very interesting character. And Freddie Prinze Jr., I believe, is his name that voices him. He's had some very debatable statements that I would say, or how he interprets the Force. I'm not sure if you've seen those interviews that he's done. Very, very crazy.
Yeah, it's
stuff.
tough, but he says a lot of that stuff just comes right from Filoni, which comes right from Lucas, right? So it's one of those things of like, I don't know if I agree with all of it, but it's like, well, these are two guys telling you. But yeah, I think Freddie Prinze does a good job. Sometimes it takes me out of it because I grew up with Scooby, and I grew up with what is the other one? I Know What You Did Last Summer. So sometimes I still hear it and I go, oh, that's Freddie Prinze, where I don't do it with the other characters. So I wish sometimes I didn't have that, but that's fine. But yeah, I think, like you said, that's the most interesting part of this character, where he's kind of like a soldier without a country, and it's not to that big degree, but it kind of is, where, like you said, he's Padawan, he's learned the basics, and now anything he has to learn on his own. And he's it feels very much closer to the High Republic, not his mannerisms, not that way, but in the way where he's a Jedi, but he doesn't feel as contained as some other ones. He almost feels a bit more Rail. So maybe I don't know which era I'd put him in, really, because prequel Jedis, what is it? What is that era called?
High Republic.
Prequel Jedi.
The Old
like
Republic?
Emperor. Oh, no, that's not
Prequel
Order
Jedis.
66 Jedi or Order 66 Jedis. Like
Yeah, that's the Old Republic.
That's the Old Republic.
Yeah, that's the Old Republic.
What
You
are
have the
Knights
High
of
Republic, and then that goes to the Old Republic.
Oh, what happened to the other Old Republic from Knights of the Old Republic?
Knights of the Old Republic? Well, they changed that to the High Republic.
No, I think you're wrong on that. I think because think about
There's no such thing as
eras.
like. Okay.
Because I feel like they're talking about that when they announce those movies, and here's Cantina Conversations already. But either way, I guess this is the best thing. He feels like amalgamations of many others, but the things he doesn't feel like is those prequel Jedis, where they're very kind of stood up, and they're very kind of keeps to themselves. He's very open. He sometimes just seems like a regular dude. It's just out in the known for everybody that him and Hera are getting it on. So he has a lot of attributes that don't really complement a Jedi, and I don't think that's because he's a bad Jedi or he's a different Jedi. No, it's just that he was a Jedi. That Jedis usually are raised and born and trained, born just in the spiritual sense, in the specific way, in the specific order, in the specific fashion, where this guy has not. He learned to be a Padawan and then was thrusted in the world. So at times, and I don't think this is a bad thing, he sometimes feels like a regular guy trying to be a Jedi. Sometimes he feels like a poser trying to be a Jedi, but that's just because of the situation he was put in, and there's not much you can do. That his master's dead, and yes, in this season we get to hear him talk to Yoda, but it doesn't feel like he's had much of that in his life. So okay, here you go. Make that bigger there?
They call it the Fall of the Jedi, which is a weird way to term it. But
yeah,
I
remember it's not
you're
old.
Right.
Yeah, because I remember we got this chart, and even then, I don't think that's because New Republic that's after New Hope, right?
Yes.
So I feel like they should have a title other than just the Fall of the Jedi. So I'll just refer them as prequel Jedi. So it's, again, he has like a little bit of that when he's trying to teach Ezra, but that's where I feel like he's also kind of a poser to it. That's where it's just like he's trying his best, but it's only going off. It feels like the best way, until you may understand this one day, it feels like when you see your oldest kid try to teach your youngest kid, and they're trying to be the parent, and it's like, well, you kind of got like some idea of it, but you haven't grasped the whole concept, or maybe you're doing things a little incorrectly. That's Kanan, and he's just trying his best, and I guess we'll talk about all together. But I like the ragtag crew of a bunch of different characters. I think they were smart to put in a few. You got your alien, you got your Twi'lek, you got your Mandalorian, you got a Jedi, and you got Ezra, who's this new character. You got a droid, of course. The droid R5 had the Force as I suppose. Who's R5 again?
R5 was the guy who was on the mission who blew his like bad motivator, so R2 could go and
Right. Where's the ban button? Let's ban user and delete their comments. But which I still think I'm banned. I swear. I put a comment in once since Kirkland banned me and it didn't show. So I think Kirkland's just banned my Trust Now account. Just bastard. But yeah, I like Kanan a lot. I feel like in this season you don't get much with him and the other. You get him and the other characters, but I feel like the only relationship points are him with Hera and him with Ezra, and I like both of those dynamics. I think, like I said, I was surprised when I watched first time just to know that him and Hera just out in the open getting on. So he didn't learn that part being Padawan, or he's like, I don't need to take that training with me.
I don't think
just
that matters
leave it
anymore.
behind. No.
No, I don't like at this point in the game. Like I think that's he definitely was obviously not taught that, I would dare say, but like I don't think it matters. Like for him, most of the Jedi are gone, and he's upholding it in his own way.
Yeah, and I guess because it's different where you have Luke and you have even Rey to extend, and obviously they're the main characters, so this happens. But this is not a guy, and that's what I talk about when the open world. He's not trying to find all other Jedi. He's not trying to learn about the Jedi or have some sort of find the first Jedi temple and start a new order. He's just a Jedi in this world now. It feels like he's completely given up, and not in a bad way because it has been so long. It just feels like he has given up on any of that, or that wasn't even a thought of his mind. So he's just a normal dude that is a Jedi. So I'll look at my notes, see if I have anything more on him. But yeah, I like the mini feud that he has with the Inquisitor. They have a couple brush ups and stuff, and he does because that is his death, right? Him falling off the shaft or whatever.
The Grand Inquisitor?
Yeah,
that's his death on the Star Destroyer.
Yeah, because I remember everyone freaking out with Obi-Wan. I just couldn't remember that was it or if he comes back. But I remember Obi-Wan when he got stabbed. Everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, they're destroying canon." But that was a good little face-off. And again, he's a good Jedi, but he also just feels like a Jedi that could get killed. Not against the other clone troopers or stormtroopers and stuff. It just feels like he still could get easily killed by some of these other Inquisitors. But he puts up a fight, and we got obviously maybe we can transition into Ezra because they got at the end of the series you get like a very fun kind of Phantom of the Menace type of lightsaber duel with them two versus the Grand Inquisitor. So we'll take our first ad break and then we'll start talking about Ezra. So we'll be right back. And we're back. So yeah, what do you think about Ezra? Also, just their dynamic as a master and a Padawan, or even then, because Kane's just like a knight technically, right? Like, and
not
even
even.
Then, it's like, yeah,
not
it's
even like
technically,
he's still a Padawan.
right? Yeah, he's just a guy. He's just because I guess technically they can be Jedi Padawans, right? So I guess technically he can still call himself a Jedi.
Oh, he's a Jedi. He's a Jedi
Yeah.
Padawan for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, for him to be a Jedi Knight, I can't speak to that. I have to see what kind of like memories or flashbacks we get down the line here, going through the series, and what kind of tribulations or tests that he's gone through to pass. I'm sure him just taking on an apprentice, because it's kind of like, it's actually very much like the Obi-Wan and Anakin situation, where Obi-Wan was still a Jedi Padawan, and he got promoted to Jedi Knight because he was putting up a beef with Yoda. Like, I'm going to take him on as my apprentice.
Yeah.
So there's that, and this kind of reflects that quite well, actually. But it goes hand in hand with what Yoda said in that sequel trilogy, like pass on what you have learned. I guess he says it in the first original trilogy, I should say too. But it goes to show Kanan's just going to pass on what he learned. And I'd be lying if I wasn't brought to tears a little bit there when that holocron played at the end of this episode 2, and it's just Obi-Wan talking. And so, yeah, it's like our order, is destroyed, but a new hope will arise or something like that. And Kanan's just watching. I'm thinking, oh, it hits. Anything Order 66 related just hits me right in the feels and and all that stuff.
Always gets you.
It always gets me. Seeing when Ezra's introduction into learning what the Jedi are, or like he knows what the Jedi are, but learning Kanan as a Jedi, I like that. And I love just the jaw-dropping moment too when Kanan goes full reveal mode and is on that saving the Wookiees, which the Wookiees, I'm sorry, they just looked absolutely terrible. But
They do.
It's
What are you
whatever.
doing? Tell me. Oh, everyone's about to find out. He starts doing his Force stuff.
Yeah, he looks the score kicked in, and Agent Kallus is like, focus fire on the Jedi. And I'm sure like young kids at this time were just like, like losing their minds. But yeah, good stuff. You at that point you think he's a superb Jedi. He's the bee's knees, but you then, as you said, like you start to see him how he's training Ezra and just his fights, how he gets kind of bought pretty easily, and just where his position actually is. And then you remember 16 years into Imperial occupation, we're still 5 years out from A New Hope and those events. So you can kind of place Kanan, obviously, now in retrospect, we can place him as being a kid at the time, but Ezra probably wasn't even born yet, because his parents have been dead for 7 to 8 years, and I guess he's got to be like 16 or 17 years old.
I think so. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Okay, so he would have been alive during the Clone Wars, but still really too young to really know what was going on, I guess. But yeah, still too old to technically be doing the training, because you could see in this series, like his training of Ezra, it has some hit moments, but then it also has other moments where he acknowledges that he didn't prepare Ezra, where they go to that abandoned Clone Wars base and Ezra taps into the dark side. And I love that, because that is touched upon in future seasons. Ezra's touched to the dark side, and it gets very, very good, like some good quality content. That Clone Wars scene was fantastic, though, in that base, because that base is actually from Clone Wars Season 7. I don't know if you remember them having that, being in that base.
No.
Yeah, they're in that base for that season, which is very cool. But yeah, those monsters were just very terrifying.
Yeah, and then what do you think about Ezra as a character?
Oh yeah. He I didn't like him at first, but he very much grew on me, very, very in an escalated rate, I would say, because I think that his inner turmoil of tapping into the dark side is what's really pulling me in. And I don't want to say he's like an Anakin Skywalker, because he's definitely
better than Anakin.
Well, he makes the better call than Anakin, because I mean, we'll talk about when we get to season 4. Palpatine's stuffing things, but he definitely makes the right call over Anakin in comparison, but he definitely is not devoid of the tribulations, and I would dare say that he's got a lot more, I can't say pain to overcome or grief, because he's got such a found family and support factor for him. But when you think like trying to train as a Jedi in Imperial occupation times, when you have Inquisitors hunting you, all the Empire's trying to kill you, you're always on the run, and it always seems like there's no hope. That's very different from Anakin, where Anakin's leading a war campaign. You know, he's got clone troopers, and he's got all this and that, and he's got what's supposed to be his family kind of turning on him. Well, I guess for different lights. I don't know.
Well, I think the difference you have with those two is I think that's where you take the Jedis out of it, because he doesn't. Anakin, of course, has a lot of issues, and he's not my favorite Jedi. I know some people have there, but like I can admit, like I think he's a great storytelling device, right? But he has. I feel. With Anakin, it'd be interesting to see what his life would have been like if there was no Clone Wars, right? Because he has to be, a general and do all this stuff. But either way, if you take that out, because to me that doesn't have much of the movies. If you just look at the movies, it's the pressure of the other Jedi or the other Council, or not feeling that he is powerful, but people don't view him as powerful enough. Or that's not an Ezra worry. I'm not saying that Ezra wouldn't have gone through that, but that's not a struggle he has to, because Anakin's struggle is purely at that point. I know it kind of makes him sound like lame, but like it's just political, right? It's not really life or death. It becomes life or death, of course, but for multiple years, I'm not talking about the war, it's just within the Jedi, his problem with Mace Windu and all that, like it's just because he's annoyed he can't get what he wants, right? Whereas Ezra, his whole life, majority of his whole life, he's probably had to just try to survive. So I think there's not that time to kind of be worry about that so much. Like the struggles he has with his powers in this show is more that he's just like, he doesn't want to disappoint Kanan, where Anakin, he has it every once in a while. He'll say some line about Obi-Wan's the wisest man I know, but then he just fucking trash talks him for 2.5 hours. So you go, really? Like, do you care about him that much? That's a debate for another day. But I don't think he has. I think the only time not the only time, but when he does veer to the dark side or more anger is because he's just disappointed with himself and he can't be as good. And he always got, oh God, why am I forgetting the alien's name? The big guy. He was in Mando. He's in the crew. Zeb. He's always fucking just shitting on Ezra and any chance he gets. Sometimes Hera will take Hera, not so much, but Hera will take, or Satine will take her shots too. So that's where it's like he's brought down a lot, where the council shots were never like that at Anakin. So I think that's the difference. Is it's just the situations they have to grow up in, and obviously, yeah, Ezra's not as powerful as Anakin, and I think I'm the same as you. Where Ezra, I think he is better later on seasons, but now watching the show, it's like I don't know if I'd want the Ezra from 3 and 4 to be here, right? Because then there'd be no development. If he's just that Jedi or that character, and that's maybe some of my problems with Anakin in the Clone Wars, where like most of the Clone Wars, lots of those characters don't evolve because all their big evolvement happens in episode 3, so he can only go so far, where Ezra at this point was only in this show, so he has more the kind of whiny, just more teen-like character. He's the classic Luke, the classic Rey. His parents are gone, and that's a mystery, which I didn't think was needed, especially when we got Rey as parents needed. In retrospect, it's like, okay, we don't need that. He is like not a chosen one type, but we meet them, and then all of a sudden, oh, something special about you. So I think some of those tropes they could have maybe not done or spaced them out a little bit. Like, to me, I think it actually, you would have been fine with just having Kanan as the Jedi and maybe Ezra getting those powers later on, but they wanted to do like a lightsaber duel at the end of the season, so clearly wouldn't have fit in the parameters of this show. But I think like you already had one Jedi, and I liked the crew enough. I liked this crew of Ezra being this kind of ragtag people that have no buddies, and I think an episode I'll shout, which I think episode 1 and 2, the two-part like set stuff, I think is really good to meet the characters, to meet him. And I think what my favorite part about that is at this point he is more on the scoundrel side, but more like a even more Weasley scoundrel than Han Solo, where it just doesn't seem like he's the most successful. But to kind of put the point across is when they eventually they steal some things and they go, I think it's the Wookiee. I think it's Wookiees in episode 1 or 2, right? That they help out. Yeah. And then when they're thanking him, he's like, "Oh, I didn't do anything. Like I wasn't trying to help you." And then they say, "Oh, just accept it anyways." And I think that's the first. Sure, it's right in episode 1, but that's where it's a bit more of a kid's show. But to me, it still works as far as you can tell. Okay, he's been on his own for a while. He has to do anything to survive, and he is kind of a selfish, maybe a little bit of an arrogant character at times. So when he meets these people that at first we're going to leave him to die, but they don't. So that's a big sign for, okay, there's these people that might care about me. And then 2, when you have these people that he helped kind of indirectly, he wasn't really trying to help them, grateful that they did, and grateful that, in this world that everything's shit, this character took the time to help out. That does change Ezra, and you get to see that more. So I think the arrogant side kind of goes away. I think the weakest part of my stuff with Ezra is I don't mind him having some sort of relationship with Satine. Season 1, it's just very cringe. Sabine, right? Sorry, yeah. Satine's the Obi-Wan girlfriend, your daughter now. So I hate that they did that. I hate that Satine and Sabine. Like I know it's meant, but because they're just more main characters. But Sabine, I hate the flirting and that all feel, no pun intended, very forced, and I feel like shows do a lot. I don't think that was needed. I think you could save that, and even then that feels very kiddie. It feels very just like, oh hey loser, and it's like that weird playground grade 3 flirting, but it's like they're still old enough. So that's the probably concept I think I would take out of the show, because I don't think, and maybe I'll change my mind because it's a second watch. I don't know if it's needed at all. Sabine and him could have just been friends. But overall, yeah, Ezra, I think I like more as the season progressed, but I like more as the show goes on. But he's definitely has to be kind of at times a video game character, where you got to give him a bunch of mystery and fill in the blank until we get some story stuff. Like I said, I didn't need the story of his parents. I don't know if I need him to be a Jedi right away. Like, oh, there's something special about you. But it works in the confines of what they do at the show. So,
yeah.
Who do you want to talk about next?
Well, let's talk about Sabine Wren, some Mandalorian in here. the one thing that I think she's a fantastic character. I love seeing more of the Mandalorian kind of universe brought into the fold, and I think Sabine was a great way to kind of bring that in. But I always found like her armor being just colored and everything, it just felt that's
Yeah.
where it felt cosplay-ish, especially
Not
in the
for
live
me.
action setting.
Yeah.
But
Especially, I just feel like if you're trying to stay low key, that's some very bright armor to be wearing out and about. To me, yeah, I've never liked the armor, never.
well, we see that present in the TIE fighter. It just stands out a little bit, so they get caught.
Yeah, I just don't understand. So
But yeah, overall though, I think she's a very interesting character, and it's cool that eventually we get to kind of see her motivations and reasons for why she is where she is now, because Mandalore is about to go through a very tribulative state against the Empire. They've obviously set up colonization on Mandalore and everything like that, and so from what we know about her, she dropped out of the Imperial Academy on Mandalore, and she's just kind of like doing her own thing. I can't remember how the Wrens are really affiliated with the greater Mandalorian kind of like picture in terms of like the Krees and like Bo-Katan. Well, I guess Bo-Katan.
they feel more created for this. Like it feels very. I'm sure there's other ones they probably now have added more, but this felt very much like, well, we're gonna pick a Mandalorian that a family you haven't really heard of, so we can kind of do whatever with this character. And I don't remember enough of the other things they may reveal in this season, but it just feels like we need a Mandalorian character. We want another female character, which is good because it's 3 guys, 2 girls. I don't know what Chopper is technically. Like I don't know if droids have genders and stuff like that. So I feel that's probably the basis of what they did, but I think they on purpose didn't want to make it have any big, like really no one has really big connections here. And I think that probably turned people off. That's where it's the opposite of Clone Wars, where you got your 2 main stars are Anakin and Obi-Wan, and then all supporting characters are Yoda, Mace Windu, like these main event like big characters where we meet some in this series, of course, we'll talk about, or especially just even in the season alone. But when you just look at on paper, the poster, they're a bunch of nobodies, they're, and that's where I think they also do like the Rogue One thing, right? Where, in my opinion, I don't like these characters are around, but that's where they make them nobodies. It's like, oh, well, you haven't heard of the Ghost Crew that was trying to help out and stuff, which I even don't mind because I think what I like is it changes a little bit as the show goes on. I think I like that it's just a ragtag crew that's trying to help out the way they can, because you would be repressed. I just like even the first mission, I like that. I just don't feel it many times later on maybe, but in this season there's not like this could stop the Empire forever. It doesn't feel like that. It feels very specific missions, or they're trying to survive. It never feels like they have where Rogue One, which is fine. Rogue One is we could stop the Empire forever story, or damage them.
Yeah, and I think the overall narrative with it just kind of introducing this is like a rebel cell. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Because you have
actually.
those. Yeah.
You have those, yeah, and so I'm okay with them being nobodies, and at the same time piggybacking off of what we're familiar with. You got the big hairy beast alien. You got the Jedi, you got the gunslinger and all that stuff, and the pilot. So they're definitely pulling off that similarity and that familiar approach that we see in A New Hope, I would dare say. So it worked. It clearly worked. But in regards to Sabine, everything that she does that's artistic related, I appreciate that because it goes hand in hand with Thrawn, which we get to later on. But yeah, she's
lots
just,
of images in the teasers nowadays of them looking exactly like the animated characters because they're Sabine drawings, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's an interesting character. Inner turmoil.
yeah, I think it obviously maybe I can transition. I'll talk about her, but talk about the other ones too. I like them all, but I feel like they get more shine as the shows go on. I feel like they are, because I feel the big thing this show does is setting the scenery of what the state of the universe is, which we kind of know, but still I want to hit that down. You have lots, I think, with Kanan and Ezra, and then I think the other characters have little moments, but I think they are definitely the supporting character. The Kanan and Ezra are definitely the main characters. So I feel like you learn little pieces about them, but at least with this season, I've grown to like these characters, but at least with this season, I didn't walk away being like, man, I love Sabine, I love Hera. Like I like them all, and I think they work well as a unit. unit. You know, I don't know if any of them are characters that, hey, if I were to get the Sabine show at this point, I would have been all bored. You know, it's like, okay, this works. Like I said, yeah, I never like the color stuff. It just feels, you know, also just feels very anime-ish in a Star Wars world where it's like, this is a time, especially like in the dark times. Like if I think of A New Hope and I think of Sabine and like that color scheme, like that just doesn't feel right. It feels too modern day, I think, for me. That's the thing. So even her hair to me feels a bit modern at times. So, but like I said, I think she's a good foil. I don't like the Ezra. I like Ezra and her working together. It's anytime they just try and force this like cringy flirting stuff. That doesn't really work for me. I almost wish they took it as more like a brother sister sort of dynamic in this season. Like I said, I'll kind of think about it more as we go along and see how that changes. Because clearly in the teasers for Ahsoka, she's missing him, but you could just miss a brother too. You don't have to miss a love interest. Obviously, they weren't thinking that far ahead when they did this show, thinking you get Ahsoka live action show. So I do enjoy her, but she's nothing to write home about. That's where I transfer in Hera, where Hera I think I like more. Like, I would definitely put Zeb at the bottom, but Zeb's just that character archetype that I don't really, I'm not drawn to. It's like Wrecker and Bad Batch. Like, that's not my type. The heavy that has a lot of jokes that sometimes, and Zeb's not dumb, but he has a lot of like, there's some instance where they're talking to Hera over the comms, and it's like episode 5 or 6, or it's Kanan. They're like, "Oh, you did the red wire and blue wire, right?" And like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." Or no, it's like you did the red wire or the white wire, and they're like, "Oh well, we did the red wire." Like they say something, and he's like, "Well, you're supposed to do them both," and then they're like, "Oh, well, that's exactly what they meant." Like they make Ezra and Zeb very. They have a very little brother, big brother, but at times they have a lot of goofy moments together, you know. And then Zeb, like later on, gets some serious stuff, and there are some serious moments in the series which we'll talk about. But so Zeb, I think, is fine, and Hera gets more interesting to me as the show goes on. I think the first half of the season, there's not much she's doing. She's a pilot. She's helping the crew. You know, I like that she's a Twi'lek. I like the combination with her and Kanan, this idea of, and again too, it's like we talk about Star Wars games and stuff, like we should see more aliens being played with, and two, I like the idea of this kind of interracial couple, right, that's together, and like a main side, you'll see it all the time in side characters, but the fact there's these two, you know, beings that come from very different cultures that are together, I do enjoy that, especially a Jedi too, which like you said, they're not, maybe he's not enforcing the rules, but still that he would at least know that's something that's a little bit different. So, and obviously they go on quite the journey together. So, and I don't have much to add about Chopper. He's a joy.
That's how he probably wooed Hera. Like, hey, you know, I'm technically not supposed to be with someone.
Yeah.
Well,
the bad boy.
yeah.
Yeah. But for you, just for you, you know. So, but yeah, I like Hera's. Like she is. I don't know. Do they refer to her as the leader of the group? Because I definitely take her as the leader of the group. I feel that. Yeah, like there's one episode where Kanan, he's gambling and he loses Chopper because he thinks he has like a great hand. It's they're playing Sabacc, and he's kind of like, oh well, even if I lose him on purpose, I can get him back. He doesn't get him back. He has to do a job for a character we'll talk about, but the Hera will just ream them out and be like, you lost this, you lost that. So, you know, I enjoy her kind of leading the team because Kanan is like wiser than the rest of them, I'd say, but even him, at times he will make kind of almost dude broy decisions, and Hera always seems the one that's keeping the team together.
Well, the ghost is hers, Chopper is hers. She is she gives the orders out. So it's her show. Like she's running, not like her TV show, but it's her show in the sense like she's running the show. And so Kanan not being, I even think her call sign is Spectre 1, if I'm not mistaken, and I think Kanan is Spectre 2, and Spectre 3 is, I think it might be Chopper actually, but again, I digress. Hera is definitely getting better as the show progresses, and I like the direction that she's heading because she gets more confident, and her having the only connection to Fulcrum as well. I really like that when you get an episode where Sabine is just kind of like huffing and puffing, like, why can't we meet Fulcrum? Why is it only you that gets to meet Fulcrum? And greater reason behind it when Kanan gets captured. Hera has given the order, like, we got to go into hiding, and Hera, you can tell, has to make that hard decision, like, we're not going to go after him, we're just going to stay put. And it's those kind of things that make for a really interesting dynamic character progression, especially when she gets her orders disobeyed, but then she disobeys the orders when they get the lead and such. But very, very interesting character. I'm excited to see how Elizabeth Winstead portrays her as well.
Yeah.
Interracial, or interspecies. I guess it's not interracial.
I guess it is interspatial, yeah.
It was always an interesting concept. Again, like spoiler, whatever. Well, yeah, I'll just remind me in season 4 to talk about that thing between Kanan and her.
Sure, I'm sure we'll
Remind
definitely
me.
talk about it. Yes.
Yeah. Zeb is. I'd probably put Chopper at the bottom and Zeb above Chopper. He's interesting. I got more excited seeing him in Mando as a live action Lasat than I did seeing him as the animated version of himself in Star Wars Rebels. But he definitely has, I don't want to say gone downhill, but done a U-turn, because I feel like when we first got introduced to him, he was very serious, very grumpy. And you get that moment where Ezra gets captured and like Zeb is like, "Oh, sorry, kid, you did good," and like closes the door and leaves. It's like, "Holy shit, this is brutal." And then he lied about it too, if I'm not mistaken, because Hera's like, "What happened to the kid?" And I think Zeb lies. I think Zeb says something like,
It's that, or he doesn't really give the full story. Just kind of like, oh, he was captured. There's nothing we could really do about it. We're really like, but I get it, right? Because they are trained in a way where they have to move forward, right? They have to move fast, because if they get caught, it's over for them, as the GeekVerse meme would be. So I kind of get it, and it kind of shows like later on him, because they have interesting dynamic where they'll be kind of buddy, but then something will happen. Like Ezra's training Kanan, and he's not doing the greatest job. And like Ezra's talking with Zeb, and Zeb just pretty much implies that he's the issue. Like not that Kanan's not the great master or he's having trouble. He's just like, oh yeah, but he has to train you. And it's just like, wow, that's a lot to put on this little guy who just, is starting to learn all these things. So yeah, he kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah, I guess they share a room too, now that I think about it.
Yeah, no one else wanted to share it with him. So
No.
let's take an ad break, and we'll talk about maybe some of our favorite episodes or arcs or moments, and we'll also talk about some surprising characters. We'll be right back. And we're back. So I want to talk about one of my favorite, probably the episodes, but it's one of those things where I was talking about earlier. So it's the Empire Day one. I think that's probably my favorite. I think there's some cheesy stuff of like, you have Empire Day. It's the same day as Ezra's birthday. And like I said, I don't know if I enjoy, because here's the thing. Not only does Ezra have the missing parents, they find out that, hey, these people were people that were going against the Empire. And literally they have some character who is like, oh, what is the term? It was, I can't remember. God, what is it? Okay. At some point, there's a character, because they had a droid and that got deprogrammed, and it kind of like, I can't remember, did it sell them out or sell their location? Not that the droid meant to, it was like hijacked or something. I can't remember, but you remember the one that had, it's like Z-Bot or Zubot or something on Empire Day? The one that was like,
the technician.
Yes, they that was supposed to take care of Ezra, but didn't. They have some line. This is where I go at cheesy. They were like, "Oh, your parents were the original voice of hope," and it's like, all right. Like I hated that they're trying to say
on
that
Lothal. On Lothal.
I guess I just was trying to hate that, like, Ezra's parents. Of course, Ezra's parents were like the first people that decided, like, we're gonna speak out. That's just like a Star Wars thing. But other than that, I really liked that whole episode of them kind of being on enemy ground. I love the fireworks that happened that they planned out. But it's like a good kind of heist episode to mess things up. But I like that they're not on a Death Star and they're not having to dress up as stormtroopers. I just love that it kind of got progressively worse, and it was a good point, I thought, to get Ezra's parents' origin, where yes, they were, rebels. They got found out, they got killed, and then Ezra was kind of put on their own. But I really liked everything about Empire Day. There's a fun little moment where they kind of have like a fun version of the Empire March. What's the actual term of that?
Imperial March.
Imperial March. Thank you. I was close with some letters there, but they have like almost like a birthday version theme of it. So I think that Empire Day Part 1 and Part 2 is probably my favorite of this season. I really enjoy how it escalates. So you can talk about that, or you can talk about an episode or arc that you really liked. But
I'm trying to remember which episode it was. Okay, so there's one episode with Grand Moff Tarkin kind of arriving, and shit just hit the
call to
fan
action.
That was that episode. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Grand Moff Tarkin visits Lothal to deal with the rebels. That's episode 13.
We got some absolutely groovy things in that episode, I would say. Like it really got it got intense, and that was when it really started to show like its true colors, because Grand Moff Tarkin was talking to those two goofy Imperial commander guys that we were dealing with, and the Inquisitors standing behind them, and it's just use your like your side vision, or like, what do you call it, your peripheral vision, sorry.
Yeah.
And the Grand Inquisitor puts his lightsaber in between them, and then it just cuts up to Grand Moff Tarkin, and like you hear the saber activate and he pulls the saber back. It's like, holy shit, he just executed these two men in this kids show. God damn. So that was crazy. That was very, very crazy. The other episode I really, really liked was where is it here? Empire Day was definitely really, really good. The Jedi Master, Luminara, I think was her name. Luminara and
Yes.
I thought that was really, really clever, using. It just felt like that scene in Obi-Wan when they had all like the Jedi bodies all just like in these like dead cryo stasis. It just felt, it was eerie, and that was the case with her, and just using her and her presence to kind of lure Jedi in that were trying to save her, just to execute them. That's just so brutal. It's so
terrible.
twisted. Yeah.
And you get that's a good episode too, because you have that, and it's not a bad thing, but he takes that way, and that's where I think at times where certain masters and apprentices get that. I know Obi-Wan and Anakin did have that, but they just have a different relationship. I don't know. It'd be a good comparison to talk about, but I think we are a big fan of the Qui-Gon Obi-Wan one, because that's one where they both feel like they're not good for each other. I don't think Obi-Wan ever feels that way because he took on Anakin because of Qui-Gon. I feel like he feels like he has a handful, but I feel like he's fully committed to be Anakin's master, you know? Maybe there is more books and stuff that point that direction, but Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon always feels him letting him down, and Obi-Wan feels like he's letting him down. I feel like Ezra and Kanan have a similar relationship like that, because the idea to find this Jedi is Kanan wants to find this Jedi so he can give Ezra to her so she can train him. And Ezra takes it as like, oh, it's because I'm not good enough. I think that's the same episode where Zeb makes that joke of like, oh, it's because he's training you. Ezra takes that as like, oh, because I'm not good enough. You know, he doesn't even want to train me. I'm not worth his time. And Kanan's more taking it like, oh, well, he actually needs someone that's worthy and a good master, where I'm not these things. So you have both of them kind of self-deprecating themselves without the idea. And then, like you said, yeah, very, very shady, which the Empire would do is just like using like the Force. And what it does is like the aura like gives out screams. So you pretty much think someone's calling for help, but it's just them just kind of isolating that. But then they have the realization, okay, they're going to train you. And that's the thing that like Ezra, there's some line where like, oh, you're not going to train me. It's like, oh, I am going to train you, but you're going to be a Jedi. There's no more to try. Like, he kind of gives his like do or do not sort of speech to Ezra, right? Even though Yoda has to give that to Kanan later on, which that's another good episode too. I love when they got to go, they're feeling the calls and he has to get a kyber crystal. I love any of that stuff. I love when we did that in with Cal in the video game, like with the Ilum. I really, really loved, and I forgot about this. Maybe it's been in other lore and canon, I don't know. But I love when you have to have Ezra go in the cave, and it's a classic. Luke did this, Rey did this. It's his visions episode, right, where he's going to see the dark side, a bunch of bad stuff. He fights the Grand Inquisitor a bunch of times, but he's not actually there for all of it. It's all visions. But I love that this is the episode we get Yoda. He's talking to Kanan, and Kanan just has to sit and kind of meditate on this. But
Wait to
around,
die. Like
well, yeah,
masters.
around him, yeah, he has all these other. There's all these other masters that have been mummified, because that's the way that they're supposed to sit there and wait till their apprentice comes back, and they just wait there and die. And that's what I do really love, that aspect. You know, realistically, you go like, why don't you just get
Waste
up?
of a Jedi.
But it is, but there's something I like about that religious kind of cult feeling about the Jedi. Well, these are people that have put so much faith in their Padawan that they might come back one day that they're going to sit there and they just died. So I really enjoyed that episode in those aspects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really, really cool. And I liked, again, it adds more of a point of intrigue to Lothal. Not that it's just any like random planet, but it's definitely rising in importance, which I appreciate. That the whole temple sequence is great. Him getting his crystal at the end was fantastic, and I loved how Yoda had this like dual dangling conversation between Ezra and Kanan, and it was Kanan. knowing that it was Yoda. I appreciate that, and
Master Yoda.
yeah, understanding what he is being taught, and then Yoda like kind of guiding Ezra and just kind of like showing Ezra a little bit more of the light and just like, oh no, you aren't doing this for revenge, you're doing it I guess more in the sense of like defense is ultimately what Yoda was trying to get at. But Yoda's
At first,
just,
though, they had some dark side conversations because Ezra was like, "I'm gonna make them pay," and then he's like, "Oh,
then I'm
you
gonna
want to
come
become a
kill
Jedi?" People that didn't watch the show, that didn't happen. But then Yoda like says it not in such a way where he's like showing his hand. It's more a question. He's like, "Oh, you want to become a Jedi for revenge or vengeance? Is that it?" And then Ezra kind of talks on. So, and that's where I do, like you said, there's stuff we'll talk about later, and there's stuff that maybe who knows what happens with the show, but early on they definitely give some dark side seeds or some struggles with this character, right? And again, to me, it's like, sure, he lost his parents, but it's not any worse than what Kane went through. Like, Kane didn't maybe lose his parents, but he lost his entire family and was out on his own as well, and he doesn't really have those urges. But around this time is when we start seeing, I think this is the same moment where the Inquisitor does eventually show up, and Ezra has a very kind of Bastila-like type power where he can control animals or creatures and kind of, sync up with them and control them. But then there's this massive one that he controls, but the only reason he controls that is because he taps into the dark side. And obviously Ezra or Kane so far is using it as like a teaching experience. I think maybe that's a negative. I feel like he's not, it's tough, right? Because you don't want to be too hard on him in the early stages, but obviously he doesn't know how bad, things could get because he's not been a master, right? He's not been around that. And to him, he didn't know that Anakin turned to the dark side and stuff. So it's almost like the dark side right now, because there's been so few Siths at this time, is like a cautionary tale. Like, oh, you shouldn't. It's like, don't stare at the TV too long with your eyes open. Your eyes will go blind. But really, like, it can lead to some bad stuff because what I imagine for the Jedi, they kill Count Dooku, and for that would have been the last known Sith on record, right? Because Vader, I guess, right?
Vader's a
Is
Sith,
around?
yeah. But again,
Yeah.
you make a good point.
But when does Vader pop up in
obviously.
the public?
Oh, I would give it
Because I feel like even
a
on the
few-
Empire,
a few weeks maybe at most. Like, it was
Okay.
pretty quick. He got in that suit pretty freaking quick.
it's just a question though of like, because even with the Empire, when they're talking about the power of the Force and the dark side, like some of those officers question Vader of like that not even being real, right? So it's one of these things like, I know Vader's a Sith and he's out there, but I don't know if people are. I don't know if they're saying, "Oh, that guy in the black, that's a Sith," because I think most guys that are seeing Vader are dead.
No, but
or
you
captured.
also have to remember too. Let's look at Fallen Order, for example. Seer, like once Vader appeared, Seer knew what he was. Seer's like, no, this is something worse to Cal. And you have, I'm pretty sure, like, we'll get to it, but season 2, Kanan, I was able to identify what this thing was, because like even then, that was in the intro episode, I think, where he's like afraid of Vader, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, because the only Vader we got was the very beginning of this episode or the series, and then at the very end, he sent us like the big cliffhanger as far as Rebels got away, but now it's time to send the big dog because there's now 1, maybe 2 Jedis, and not much Vader here, but yeah, we'll talk about Vader next season because he's used quite a bit. Yeah.
So they're definitely aware of him, and that being said, when he kind of became in the public eye, it was not immediately. If I remember correctly, in the Darth Vader comics, it took a little bit of time. Even the Inquisitors were formed, and they didn't even know about Vader, because I remember the Inquisitors were dispatched onto Vader, Palpatine playing his fucking mind games, and then Vader just absolutely decimated the Grand Inquisitor, and the Grand Inquisitor was like, "Oh, I thought like I was the one," but then the Palpatine's like, "No, you are going to serve under Vader. Vader is your master." And it's like, "Oh, there's two Sith." And they're like, "Yeah, me and Vader." So that's how it kind of unfolded with the Grand Inquisitor.
It's the Grand Inquisitor of me. It's like, that's not how it works, Palpatine. There's there too. So I guess I was just wondering, like, how, like, I feel, because even then, people don't know the origins of Vader, right? So I just feel like what
no
Kanan.
one does.
Yeah, I know Kanan would know of this, but I feel like what Kanan would know, Count Dooku would be like his closest representation to a Jedi that turned evil. Like, that's what I'm trying to think of. Like, I feel like with Ezra showing signs of dark side,
because like I'd say the Inquisitors,
were they?
We don't learn that at least the Grand Inquisitor was a Jedi temple guard until later. I would say.
So that's what I mean. It's like, and not that, maybe it's also just because it is a kid show, but I just feel like when he shows dark side, it's just like a little, oh hey, you got to look up for that, but it's not too like. I feel like in the prequels when people would use dark side right away, they'd be very fast, like, hey, don't do that. You don't do, it's very tempting. But other than Yoda, he'd try to talk about, I feel like Obi-Wan, yeah, they're child abuse. But it just feels like maybe he does not, I think he's in this mind frame where Ezra using some dark side stuff is not going to turn him to the dark side. Where I think in other eras we've seen Jedi's the second someone does anything dark side, it's a huge red flag, and they start questioning their motives kind of right away.
Unless you're Anakin and you kill a whole village of.
Oh, he's the
Tusken
chosen
Raiders.
one, so he got away with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
God damn.
I do think though with Ezra tapping into that, like you're right, Kanan's probably last out there experience or not experience insight of a Jedi turning to the dark side would be Count Dooku, but I think any Jedi, period, Padawan or not, would be aware of the fact that if you tap into the dark side, you can succumb to it. And I think when actually, it'd be a very interesting question to have answered if, like, the new Jedi that have risen, and I'm not talking the sequel trilogy, but the Jedi that survived Order 66 are aware that Palpatine was the Sith Lord. Because the only ones that would have known that would have been Anakin, and then
not many,
the quad of Jedi Masters that got bopped.
Yeah.
And I guess Yoda and Obi-Wan. Those would have been the only ones that would have known that. Oh, I mean,
They
Obi-Wan
didn't share
should
that
have.
information with Kanan.
Well, no, Obi-Wan should have put it in his message when he put it out
Yeah.
for all the Jedi. The Palpatine is the Sith Lord.
What is there to lose at that point? You're already going into hiding, so why wouldn't it hurt to like have that out there? And you could again, that's where I always with the prequels they kind of hurt the stories because I always think about like why did Obi-Wan and Yoda not do too much? I think there's more they could have done, especially when we were talking with Kanan and stuff. It's like, get together and form your mini Avengers and let's do something. If fucking Luke, Han, and Leia can take down the Emperor, it's like all of you together. Maybe Ahsoka's around. Like you guys could have done. Cal's around. Like you guys could have had a little unit there and done some damage. But
There were probably some other Jedi. They were like, oh, Order 66 happened. They're like, oh, you know what? It's all a misunderstanding. I have to go talk to the Chancellor. I'm sure he can help sort this out. They go there and not knowing he's a Sith
Great.
Lord and get bots. But you're right.
He does his spin.
1080 spin from prone.
Yeah.
All these Jedi, if they did team up, it would have made a huge difference. And I'd love to see a what if scenario of them teaming up and starting a new Jedi Order because you still have, you got Cal, Ezra, Luke, Yoda, Obi-Wan, the guy that
Ahsoka.
got Ahsoka. You got the guy that got killed on Tatooine, who I don't remember his name. You have
right. You have Seer technically at this point.
You have
Shouldn't be
Seer.
dead, right?
You have her Master Junlin, whatever his name was. I
Right.
can't remember.
You have the other character in Fall of Jedi Survivor that is a bounty hunter, but still remember that reveal. They have powers. Remember, it's a reveal that they're a Jedi.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, it's tricky to say if he would stick around, but yeah, let's throw him. in
But
there
we
for
don't
sure,
happen in
so.
5 years, and stuff like that. The enemy could have been convinced. I'm just saying that, and this is why I hate thinking about this stuff. I don't like thinking that there was 10 Jedi around this time that could have you get together, and even Leia, count Leia, she's the Force. They would have trained her, right?
Yeah.
So that's 11. That's 11 people right now that would have had the Force Jedi powers and could have been and I'm sure there's gonna be more. And even what about this Ray Stevenson guy? Remember, he survived the Order 66 and Ahsoka. They
honestly,
say that, right?
it's interesting
Don't give
about
me the
him
time
because
travel shit.
I'm really starting to think that he left the Jedi Order way before Order 66 and actually became a mercenary for hire before that.
So we'll find out. But even
route.
then, 11-ish Jedi that you could have trained to become, but
And others, we got Jocasta Nu. Can't forget about her. She survived. Get her in there.
doesn't Vader hunt her down later, right?
Oh,
Is that
he
what
does.
happens?
He does. But if she teamed up with the other 11, then it would have been different.
I got to read that comic. No, they still used her as bait, But yeah, and then we talked about Vader. We talked about that, and then some other. We got Lando in this season. We talked about Yoda. You got R2 and C-3PO. I'm trying to think. Obviously, you got Ahsoka, which is the big kind of big mystery of the whole season. They keep telling this character named Fulcrum near the end, like Tara's nickname. So yeah, I think for me they're all good uses. The Ahsoka thing we'll talk about more next season, but I think that was a good tease, and I think that's for you that we were talking about. That was starting to be okay, some of this Clone Wars stuff is going to matter. I really liked the Lando episode. I feel like at times Lando acts in a weird, very friendly, almost too friendly way for me in this. It just feels like it's to get Lando in the crew. He just kind of even when they leave, he's like, till I see you again next time, friends. It's just like, I don't know, like like he says that to Han and his crew because Han's like one of his best buds in like a jokey sort of way, maybe enemy way. It just feels like a little like friendly, but it's fine. I still like Lando, so that was cool to see. We got Bail Organa as well, and that's how they kind of get linked up as well. And same thing, Bail's there. Got Saw Gerrera, you could get his unit, but I do like that Bail has them do kind of one mission. It feels very much like Inception as like a test, and later on comes back to them with like bigger stuff, and obviously it's going to grow. So I think for me, for the most part, like I said, the Yoda thing still bugs me. I think Yoda should be completely, because I've heard so many people be like, oh, he cut himself off the Force to not get hidden. He went on Dagobah. But to me, him sending out like calls, that should be like Wi-Fi, where somebody like Vader or Palpatine should be able to pick that shit up to his making eyes, but it doesn't matter. That's how I feel. So I feel that all the characters, for majority, like if I'm talking about like a percentage rate, like 85, 90%, I like, maybe even 95. So I think they do a good job incorporating them, you know, trying to, because you need that mix of stuff. Yes, at times does it make the universe feel a little small that they're bumping all these people into 15 episodes? Sure. And even then you got Tarkin, but Tarkin I can buy because he's like a war leader here. So
I'd say the Yoda reaching out thing, like it's like a payphone. You got to go to
I didn't ask.
payphone, collect call at Jedi Temple. That's the payphone. And when you're in Jedi Temple,
Oh,
you can
yeah.
reach out. So there's that. And
okay.
yeah, Tarkin's just always a good time seeing him in there. And I loved when he's just lashing it out when he arrives in that episode, and the Commodore, or I think the Governor Price's temporary replacement.
God.
She's a weasel, but she's basically like, go for it.
Can we stop? Because I'm going to forget about him. I hate the Klaus character, the
Agent Callus.
Hate him. He's somebody
Really?
the same thing as Sabine. I hate his hair and his mutton chops. It's just like,
Mutton chops.
it is mutton chops. It's just like the sideburns. Yeah, that's where, to me, that when we started seeing the first images of Rebels, when I saw him, like, that's a very kiddie type of villain. So I hate that character. Not a fan of that character at all. And I just feel like they introduced multiple villains that are more interesting than him. He's like the main villain for like episode 1 to 3. And then I felt like they almost like, he's not that cool, so let's start introducing other people. And the Grand Inquisitor definitely takes over as the main villain, like, once we meet him, which is, I can't remember, maybe somewhere like near the end of, I don't know, 3. Like, he's around, but I'd say like maybe 5 to 6. I can't remember what episode they could do like I'm sending in this person. But yeah, hate Callus.
He gets better. He gets much better. I actually really love where his story takes him.
We'll see.
But that whole scene when Callus is there and the Grand Inquisitor are there and they greet Tarkin, and that like Commodore lady chick is there too, and she mentions the Jedi, and Tarkin just like reams them out like, oh yes, all mystical Jedis appear. Like, if you've ever seen them, well, I have. And what happened to them? They're all dead. And so what does he say? Like, yeah, that means if they're all dead, then this guy can't possibly be a Jedi. And then they push back a little bit, like, oh, well, he lives up to his expectations. And then Tarkin is like, well, if only we had someone who specialized in dealing with Jedi. And he looks at the Grand Inquisitor, and the Grand Inquisitor just kind of snarls at him a little bit. So Tarkin always he just comes out on top. He's just he's a great character. He really, really is. I wish we got more of him in the original trilogy. It is unfortunate that he got blown up. A good alluding to in this season finale when Tarkin is on his Star Destroyer, and they're like, the ships, they got a threat, or they found isolated the hyperspace drive, and we got to evacuate, we got to go. And I just feel like that's a good callback to A New Hope, like evacuate in our moment of triumph. Preposterous. Yeah, other than that, Lando I found to be very interesting. I forgot he appeared so earlier on, and I liked how this Lando really felt like coincided with Glover's Lando from Solo, and I just the Sabacc, and again the mention of the ghost in the Solo movie. That is again the same ship. I can't remember, like a Y something freighter, something like that. I can't remember its designation, but I liked all of that. Lando pulling his fast ones was kind of funny. Yeah.
It has a
look
good
forward to
back
seeing
and
him
forth.
again.
They had this plan, and then used the plan to actually try to sell Hera, but it was all part of a bigger plan and classic Lando trickery. So
Yeah, that alien boss man was definitely it was gross. There was definitely some sexual innuendos there because Hera's like, you want to let your
oh
guards
yeah,
go outside and I'll feed you alone, and
he's a gross character.
yeah, very much so. But yeah, I think that what else did we get in here for characters? Ahsoka, yeah, that was the game changer for sure. Getting to see her pop in, like, oh my god, that was when I realized, okay, they're taking some gems and sprinkling it all over top for this, and I'm gonna get on board with it. I actually forgot that she was gonna be dropping in the finale for this season one, so that was a pleasant surprise. What else did we have? What other characters? Again, Governor Price was mentioned too. If you've read the book, she's got a very big tie-in with Grand Admiral Thrawn, and she get a little bit of backstory on how she became Governor Price because she was originally just a miner on the planet. Her family were all miners, and then she ended up getting a chance to go to Coruscant. She wormed her way up in the grand scheme of things in the political game and managed to secure herself a position of power. And she's one of those earlier on characters that identified how powerful Thrawn would be as an ally and basically worked with him and vice versa. Very, very interesting character. So I'm happy that we're going to be getting to see her in season 2 when we get around to her. But yeah, I think that's it that I have for all these characters. I can't remember.
The
any
only
others
note I
that
had
stood
on
out.
Lando is when he won Chopper. He in the classic Billy D. Williams had he's like, "Oh, please introduce me my new droid." And now, because what we know from Solo, I was like, "Is he planning on fucking Chopper?"
Oh
Like,
yeah, he was.
he seemed very excited to meet Chopper. So I was like,
Chopper's
"Oh boy,
got
what we
those
know
two
now."
hands,
Yeah. Oh yes.
God damn it.
Is there anything else? Because I went through all my notes. I think we talked about all the characters, some of our episodes, other characters. So if there's anything else now, shout out.
Last thing I'll shout is I love that we went to Mustafar. I love that they just all out war. I got super excited when the other rebel cells came in their Curling Corvettes and just like jumped out of hyperspace, protected the crew, and yeah, everything with that whole sequence is really, really fantastic. I think this is just it really got up to a strong start. There's definitely a lot of spiritual things that they tap into and some very slower episodes in other seasons, which will be interesting to talk about with you and just how we take it, because I feel like this show in general really pursues a very interesting, different take on the Force. You get a little bit in the Clone Wars with the father, the son, and the daughter, and I guess the children of Mortis, I want to say it is. That's touched upon obviously in Rebels, so it's gonna be
terrible story.
It's gonna be cool to kind of talk more of that with you. But yeah, it's so far it's a good start. It's a good start to this show. I really am happy with it.
Well, then for this season, because obviously we can do that. What would you give this season out of 10?
Out of 10, I would
Yeah.
probably go. I would go a 9 out of 10. I would say like
Whoa.
it's strong, it's fun. There's not much like filler-esque stuff in there, and I like. I'm rating it higher now because I've seen this. I've seen it a couple times, and it's definitely grown on me every time I've watched it. Being older now too, and being able to really take in what I'm watching and understanding, and after seeing everything else in Star Wars, all these other projects have added so much to it. Seeing where Ahsoka is in Star Wars, seeing what happened to Kanan during Order 66, and just being able to indulge in all these other Star Wars mediums has made this show rise up above so much. Even watching the Ahsoka trailer, seeing those characters live action, it has made this show rise up for me. So maybe I'm a bit biased, but that I'm sitting at a 9 out of 10 right now, probably mostly on hype.
Yeah, I think I'll go like a 7.5. I think my only negatives are some of the things I talk about, some of the tropes, some of the character interactions, like Sabine and Ezra. I think there are a couple episodes that it's fun to have filler episodes, but they're kind of give or take. So I think there's a few minor ones where I have it more. Just still on a rewatchable side. I don't know if it's a high enough quality to get to 8. I think there's definitely some episodes that are 8 and above, but the overall package, I'll say a 7.5. And yeah, that's episode 1 of the Rebels Retrospective. We'll be back next week with season 2, getting some fun stuff, getting Ahsoka. There's a very classic moment we're going to talk about that we kind of talked about in the Obi-Wan review. So lots of good things. So until then, may the Force be with you.